Вітаю, друзі! Ви на каналі EuroSapiens. Я Іванна Климпуш-Tsintsadze. Україна веде переговори про вступ до Європейського Союзу. Цей процес складний і довгий, але точно вартий результату. Адже в підсумку ми повинні отримати сильну європейську Україну. Євроінтеграція – це докорінні реформи держави і зміни наших звичок також. Завдання з кількома зірочками, але під силу нам і було під силу нашим сусідам, які готові ділитися з нами досвідом. Ми продовжуємо серію інтерв'ю з людьми, які привели свої держави у Євросоюз і вірять, що українцям теж вдасться. Сьогодні на зв'язку Словаччина. Отже, коротко про мого співрозмовника. Ян Фігель закінчив технічний університет Кошице та університет Святої Єлізавети у Братиславі. Також навчався у Бельгії та Сполучених Штатах Америки. У 90-му році був одним із засновників християнсько-демократичного руху у Словаччині. У 1992-98 роках член Національної ради Словацької Республіки. Із 98 до 2003 державний секретар, головний переговірник Словацької Республіки на переговорах щодо вступу до Європейського Союзу. Після цього був головою постійної делегації спостерігачів від Національної ради Словацької Республіки у Європейському парламенті, а також членом президії фракції Європейської народної партії у Європарламенті. Із січня 2007 року до кінця 2009 Ян Фігель був європейським комісаром з питань навчання, молоді, культури та освіти. Із 2009 до 2016 голова Християнсько-демократичного руху Словаччини. У 2010-2012 роках обіймав посаду першого віце-прем'єр-міністра уряду Словацької Республіки та міністра транспорту, будівництва і регіонального розвитку. А згодом 4 роки був віце-президентом Національної ради Словацької Республіки. З 2016 до 2019 спеціальний посланець із питань просування свободи релігії за межами ЄС. З 2021 року член правління Європейського інституту інновацій і технологій. Займається сьогодні науковою діяльністю. Dear Commissioner Figel, I am very pleased to welcome you at EuroSapiens program, and I am very grateful that you have agreed to talk to Ukrainian audience, sharing your experience on how did you manage so promptly with all the hurdles to get Slovakia into the EU. And I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. So let us start with looking at the experience, how Slovakia managed after Mečiar's rule, after absolutely autocratic tendencies that have been preoccupying Slovakia, to catch up with the other countries that have been planning to join the European Union at that point. How that was possible to get your grip together after the change of the government in 1998 and make sure that you are catching up with the others.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Deputy, for your kind invitation to this discourse or dialogue on European integration, specifically of Slovakia. But there are common principles and the messages which are, I would say, horizontal and then specific country by country. More deeply and more personally to start, I can say, which is quote from Adenauer, that Europe, common Europe, united Europe in Slovakia was a dream of a few, desire of many, and became necessity for all. And this is for two reasons, basically. One is historical, and it's prevention of war among participating integrated countries. This is true for more than 70 years, starting with Germany and France, Schumann's plan. And now it's true with 27 member states, and we hope for more. Second reason is globalization, which means a lot of impact, a lot of challenges, issues to address, and divided we are very weak to change anything, to form globalization. But together we can do a lot of common good or justice for 21st century. So this is our second major reason, rational reason to be together. And that's true also for bigger countries, again, including France and Germany, and Italy and others. And more personally, I have a name, Jan Figel, which in the previous generation belonged to my uncle, brother of my father. And he was killed or disappeared in 1953. It was still time of Stalin and his rule over Eastern Central Europe. And I bear his testimony, his desire for freedom and human dignity. And it was not only him, but many in my country who suffered a lot through decades of persecution. We got it, and I was, as you used the title, I was not only chief negotiator, but then the first EU commissioner from east of Slovakia, from region near to Ukrainian borders. So for me, this was the fulfillment of the dream of my uncle, Jan Figel, but also responsibility for freedom we got and somebody else paid brutally high price. And also the way how to anchor, protect, stabilize, guarantee this freedom for future generations. So it is about nation's memory, but also responsibility on the way towards peaceful, stable, and prosperous Europe. Slovakia was part of Czechoslovakia, and our dream, I am Christian Democrat, I was even leader of the party, right from the beginning in 1990, February, which was after, we call it miraculous year, 1989, when the communist regimes collapsed without violence, basically. So that was miraculous change. Our dream was to get in future united Europe, still far away, a Slovak star on a European flag. And for many it was illusion. For many it was kind of a genie released from the bottle. Many didn't understand what we speak about because there was one Czechoslovakia. But Czechoslovakia was a federal state. The federation was suppressed by communist regime and communist party. But then after 89, we started to remake it, to negotiate with brothers, with Czechs, how to rebuild the state from down to up, from bottom to the top. And these negotiations led to sudden decision in 1992 after second free elections that the best solution is separation, but not in negativist or antagonist meaning, but as a velvet divorce after velvet revolution, in order to get velvet remarriage in one European family. And actually this dream became a reality, full reality in terms of reuniting Czechs and Slovaks within the European community on the very same date, May 1st, 2004. So this is a possible and real road from, communism through separation to one European Union where the two commissioners, more votes in the council and more MEPs in the European Parliament. So this was kind of velvet or nice reward for the way how we did it. And to your question, of course, you mentioned Mečiar and our deficit on the road. Yeah, Mr. Mečiar, as a prime minister in 1995, applied for membership in the European Union, but it was, I would say, purely formal act, diplomatic act. without any positive response from the other side, from the then 12 and later 15 countries. Actually, Slovakia was the only country, regrettably, in 1997, when the whole large enlargement or largest historical enlargement was defined by assessments of the European Commission, was the only country which did not comply with political criteria. All the others were fulfilling and have been invited in one group in 1997, and then on the horizon was second group for 1999. And we have been the only country excluded from the process for the time being. Therefore, for the people in the country, it was a very clear message, even a warning that integration of Central Eastern Europe will go on without Slovakia if we don't make our effort, if we don't maturize our ambition, proving that we are compatible, that political criteria means our domestic interest, starting with human rights, rule of law, and constitutional provisions, constitution being respected by all, especially by the government. And it happened in 1998. Opposition forces then united a lot of fragmentation into very strong constitutional majority coalition, and the return to Europe in full sense of the meaning started, because the beginnings was Velvet Revolution, ambition to be in the Union together with others, but the real process started after October 1998. Then our three neighbors, Hungary, Czech Republic, and Poland, have been in the process of negotiations for 2 years already. So our basic deficit was 2 years at least, and of course much more work after difficult domestic years of non-compliance, of abuse of constitution, of state acts of crime or even terrorism, because son of President Kovac was kidnapped to Austria. One key witness of this abuse of secret services was killed in 1995-96. So this was a very terrible, not only image, but reality. And we needed to get out of these practices or abuses of power. So 1998 was a U-turn in relation to Brussels and European Union, including NATO. I became chief negotiator in this process, and parallelly, we also used the NATO membership action plan for preparation for future invitation, because again, three Visegrad neighbors, Poland, Hungary, and Czech Republic, since 1997, have been invited to join the Union. So we have been seen then as a black hole in center of Europe. This is wording used by then State Secretary of United States, Madeleine Albright. So to conclude my introductory message, this desire to return on the road to Europe and Euro-Atlantic cooperation, security and economic cooperation was a major wish and then even commitment of society. So not only political forces, but people. People must understand why, for what reason, and under what context we can and we should join. And this process was very demanding. I like to say it was uphill struggle, but very important for domestic reforms. To comply with acquis communautaire was answer to our gaps in many areas. fight against corruption, on rules of competition, state aid rules, public procurement, etc., etc. Many areas, actually 31 chapters. We did it for ourselves, not for Brussels, not for somebody, for ourselves. Secondly, and I will conclude, secondly, this was the answer to our neighborly relations, because actually sense of integration is not somewhere far away in Brussels, in Strasbourg, but at home. So we have to build Europe at home with our people and with neighbors, because we join the same structures. So neighborly relations, addressing, for example, historical grievances or any problems of the past, need to be tackled fairly seriously, because it's like in a human family. When you marry, you overcome the past, the isolation, and start something new, constructive, positive. So second dimension is European neighborhood, because with neighbors we live all the time. With brothers we may, go away when they get married, and that's human picture, yeah? Good neighbor, in our saying in Slovakia, is better than a brother, because with neighbor we live constantly, permanently. So neighborhood is important in your ambition. And then third dimension is a contribution to European family, which means with Slovakia, union should be more complete and stronger, more cohesive, because it is and it should be a win-win policy, that we gain a lot what we spoke about or wish to achieve, but also the others, with enlargement, they get that they get plus, not minus. And last not least message in this introductory question is that enlargement was seen from our side, from the side of candidates, there were many, 12 then, as reunification of Europe. Not so much enlargement, but Europeanization of the Union, which was originally a Western made, starting with 6 and growing up to then 15, now 27. So it made the original community more European, more complete, although it is still not complete, and it should be further Europeanized through accession of Eastern European nations and Southeast European nations from Balkans. So basically, this is a bit longer frame, but answer to your question on our accession.
Well, thank you. You've raised so many questions, and I was just thinking that you actually pointed out that it was societal and political elites' link to actually reconnect with your desire and with your dream to come back to Europe as a sovereign and capable nation, and come in as an equal among equals, and you've succeeded in that. But there are quite a few parallels also with regard to our communist past. You have your own family story, which is painful. I think almost each Ukrainian family also has a lot to share, even before the World War II, but also after, also in the Stalinist time, during this period of time. Part of Ukraine, where my family comes from, actually was part of Czechoslovakia between two world wars. And but the people there, due to actually democratic governance at that point, were given the autonomy and were also trying to present their own state. And my grandfather was part of that effort in Western Ukraine, in Transcarpathia, in Karpatska Ukraina. And so but later on, he was also imprisoned by the Stalinist regime. So we all are going through at this moment, still very similar, recollection of our memories and getting to understand, unfortunately, in this time also that freedom does not come for free. So it's not only our former generations, we are fighting right now for freedom, for our right to have a choice and right to define our own future. And I hope that we will be able, with actually also help of neighbors, as you rightly pointed out, that it's so important to have the backing and the cooperation and constructive relationship with neighbors, that we can also successfully go through this path. But I was wondering, in Slovakia, you have, from what I've read, you have always had a very high respect to European institutions, and you have had a high respect to the European values. And since you're joining the EU, there have been also a lot of Eurosceptical governments being elected, once in a while. It's been on and off since then. How do you explain this phenomenon? Why these processes are kind of raising additional challenges continuously? Is it because something was not finished, or something was not necessarily done to the perfection, to the ideal when you were joining, or there's some other explanation to that?
There are historical experiences. One is saying that if you go to a desert, it's a parable, for 40 years, then you need another 40 years to get out of the desert, which speaks about mentality and generations who have been, manipulated or persecuted and formed by totalitarian regime, and then new generations which should be, again, mature, of course, remembering the past, but building the future today. Only today we can do something. So these are some of important principles. Secondly, our effort in 1998, 2002, when we concluded negotiations after 34 months, concluded accession negotiations, and I can speak, and I will a bit more later on this, but European negotiations go on a daily basis. When you join or move to the other side of the table, it's not fait accompli or finished hard work, but it's a new level. It's like a Premier League where you need to train more, to do more, to run more, faster, more professionally. But of course, it is rewarding. And this is a clear call for maturation, for capability of general population to understand and to participate in European processes, and also then, of course, for state institutions and non-state actors like universities, media, NGOs, churches, to be part of a large family, I can say, half of billion people using freedoms, opportunities to live together. And it should work, and it should work better. So for that, we need knowledgeable citizens, institutions. And this is not so fast. This is not so automatic. You need experience. One needs to study a lot in order to understand and to negotiate and to improve large Europe, because this is our role. We face so many difficulties, challenges in global or continental terms that we need to understand, to know why. And of course, one easy to promise what is irrealistic, non-realistic, to promise something easy to come. And we know that reality is not that simple, because what easy comes, easy goes. Nothing is for free. The most expensive is what government gives you free of charge, because government doesn't have its own money. It's only, taxpayers' money redistributed. So be careful with populism, which is an abuse of people's deficit of knowledge or experience in this ambitious project. I not started, but actually when I became chief negotiator, I felt like we need to prepare people, not only for referendum, which may come and should come, according to our constitution. People had to decide on accession, on, shared competencies of sovereignty with the community. And in our case, in Slovak, relatively short democratic history of 34 years, we had only one single referendum, which was valid. Because to get more than 50% of people or population to vote on something was never easy, and it worked, fortunately, in this particular case, historical referendum on accession. But in order to prepare people, which means some, of course, years of the process, you need to communicate the basics and then details or sensitivities of the whole process, pros and cons, to show real contributions, to prepare people for it, but also risks, some warnings which are important to understand and to prepare, because competitive forces in the union are very strong. There are so many issues to understand that I don't want to overburden this point now, but to prepare people means to help them to participate in full sense of the term, because integration should not mean absorption of smaller country or weaker economy or the others into one European Union. Integration should not mean, secondly, assimilation, that you live at home what is yours, specific, and become kind of different society in large union, because we are not United States of Europe. In comparison with United States of America, all who become Americans are Americans. They have origins, their roots in Ukraine or Czechoslovakia or elsewhere, but they become Americans. It's kind of melting pot. Europe is a mosaic. And this mosaic is old, but very precious, very special. And therefore, we need to keep our identity, our culture, our cohesion, but to be part of larger community. And therefore, I speak about participation, taking part as a mature citizen. And for that reason, I published in 2002 book of Robert Schuman, for Europe, who is founding father, or the only politician who got this, better to say, statesman, who got this title. And there is my foreword in order to help people to understand the roots, the principles, the basis of this European house, because it's important to understand basis if we want to reconstruct, enlarge, to do something with the house itself. And it was translated from the original, pour l'Europe, with the foreword of Michel Barnier, who was my colleague commissioner. Now he's Prime Minister of France. So I say it as a message for Ukraine that Schumann's plan was very timely then, but it is still timely today, and people should understand what is behind this process. And then, of course, we worked a lot on practicalities, and this is my book on maturation for Europe, dozrievanie pre Európu, which is full of facts from the political and media side, my comments, articles, interviews, and then media clippings. It's a chronicle, and the chronicle becomes very special or expensive when it's older. So now, after 25 years, it is really a good chronicle. And then there was a book published by me and my colleague on chapters, which means legal, financial, institutional, political, treaty issues, important for all experts, but also for general population to understand what is there in the treaty, because accession treaty in 2004 had more than 5,000 pages. So people should
It has much more now. It's like 22,000, I think, at least.
People should be educated, informed, strengthened or enforced in joining this large community. So this was kind of lesson to be taken, but in full sense for society, for people. And therefore, I tell you this because with this knowledge, with this readiness, we succeeded. But of course, the Premier League, when we joined in 2004, is real only after accession. Before that, it's preparation, it's compatibilization, but then negotiations are ongoing. And this temptation of populism you can see in many new EU countries.
And not only new, I think there are quite a few populistic forces in some of the old European countries as well. I think nobody is immune to populism at this point, and we have to find the real tools how to challenge those who are offering the magic wand in solving all the issues, because we know that unfortunately magic wands are only existing in the fairy tales, while real life requests and requires sometimes very hard solutions, and not necessarily quick ones, and not necessarily getting us tomorrow to what we are aspiring for.
Yeah, absolutely right. I'm glad that you mentioned it, because there is a lot of populism also in the West, and we all suffer this disease or cycles. And I wanted to mention basically two important messages or principles. There are many politicians in your country, in my country, in Europe, who think they have short memory and they have, short sight or short-sightedness, which is usually connected. If you don't remember, longer story or road, you don't see to horizons and that's the problem or division between statesmen and politicians. Politicians think about next elections, next media opportunity, how to increase popularity and get some points. But statesmen thinks about next generation. And this is totally different mentality and policy, generational, in order to see children successful, not paying the bills of their fathers and mothers, which is a populistic legacy. And that's something we should remember and distinguish when there is, a lot of promises and a lot of candidates. To go for statesmen instead of politicians who are short-minded or thinking just about their victory, not so much about the next generation. And the second, democracy is a value or important achievement, but it means that every next generation, new generation, must apply or contribute or embrace values which are decisive for democracy, because without values, democracy becomes totality of majority. And or in worst case, it also is either totality or chaos and anarchy. So why I say it? Because my son, my daughters, they must decide on their commitments, their beliefs, their values. Although I educate them, I try to form them, upbring, but this is a generational quest. They start with the new tabula rasa in Latin, yeah, the clean table, and they have to write their messages. One very influential president of the United States, Ronald Reagan, said that loss of liberty is distant only one generation. So in the next generation, we may lose what we achieved if we don't care, if we don't educate our children what is important, not only to remember but to do on daily basis, including in relation to Europe.
Well, I totally agree. Back in 2014, when the war of Russian Federation has only started, we were trying to explain to many of our colleagues in the European Union, in NATO countries, that we feel that there is a lost understanding that values have to be preserved, that they have to be defended and not only kind of sloganized, not only remain somewhere on the on a big screen, because unfortunately I think there were generations at least in Western Europe, who have just been taking for granted something that their previous generations have been fighting for. So it's totally right what Reagan was saying. It's just one generation away if you are losing the sight of what you stand for and what you are ready to defend. But let's try to go to some of the practicalities of your negotiation process when you were chief negotiator commissioner. I was thinking, how in a small country like Slovakia, how did you ensure that you had enough institutional capacity, that you had public administration that was capable of taking on this huge effort and a successful effort, and not only to carry the country through to join the union, but also, as you were saying, being able to carry on immediately after the accession, because this is about new tasks and about new goals. So the question is, how did you manage to have enough professional, devoted people on different layers, at different levels, like in the government, in the, I assume in the parliament, I assume in the regional authorities, on the local level, on the community level, how all of this process was organized?
I said at the beginning that some steps have been made even before concrete process of negotiations, which we started in 1999 or after Helsinki summit, December 99. We've started actually association process under Czechoslovakia, which is also part of, rapprochement or a way towards one European Union. Although it was qualitatively lower level, but association started under Czechoslovakia. And then even under Mečiar's government, there were some structures set in order to prepare, especially institution for approximation of legislation, some governmental structures, departments have been created within ministries for the European agenda. But true professional process started after invitation, and we had to settle a strategy. Our strategy was, I would say, ambitious and realistic, and it can be both ambitious and realistic only when you have capacities, when you have people, teams, knowledgeable, hardworking, networking in broader sense of the continent. And we have succeeded this because the government was very committed led by Mikuláš Dzurinda from October 98. I was nominated to be chief negotiator at the very first session of the government, which also symbolized where is the priority. A key foreign trip of new government and the Team Europe was to Brussels to meet Commission, Parliament, and important partners. Then Austria also, because it was Council presidency. So political signal, and not only signal, but commitment was so strong that everybody understood this is number one priority, and everything else must be compliant with priority. We have established very strong departments within all ministries, which had to deal with screening of legislation, with approximation of our laws, and then, of course, to submit these new needs, new proposals to the government, and through the government to Parliament. In the Parliament, we had also very strong force for approximation of legislation, and politically, our Parliament was very willing, and not only in terms of yes to European integration, but in terms of hard working on the legislation. It was enormous effort. And as I said before, we took it not as, way how to please somebody in Brussels, Commission, to make ticks in the application, but to address our domestic deficits, gaps, weaknesses. And with this mentality, we have succeeded to close the gap you asked about before, behind the neighbors. So actually, whether the country is big or small, it is more about maturity, because you need these teams in order to function within larger community. And as I said, it is not just for the purpose of accession. It is for the purpose of existence, active existence, which means negotiations which will be even more demanding, more creative, because for accession, it is more about compliance. We have to adapt and adopt to what is already in place. But then there is, a process which is newly creative and constructive, and for that we need people. So basically, this is a must, conditio sine qua non, but not enough, of course. You have to have these teams for making country more competitive, more compatible, more robust in large continental cooperation, and capable.
But how do you prepare those teams? How do you teach them?
Yeah, good question. There are now several universities which deal with European studies. Actually, the whole knowledge about the Union needs even long studies or university studies. These are the best specialists. But then there was Institute for Approximation of Legislation, and a lot of short-term courses on certain aspects, specific issues, and it helped to prepare people. And the same, from different angle, happened in individual sectors, for example, in commerce, in industry, in law segment, in culture, that leading organizations, chambers, associations organized a lot of activities to introduce acquis communautaire, EU policies and institutions. There were many conferences where foreign guests came to speak, to share experiences, know-how. We had very good, and it is part of the message I spoke about neighbors. We had very strong Visegrad cooperation. Visegrad is a historical model which was renewed in 1991, actually declared in Bratislava for cooperation of then Czechoslovakia, Poland, and Hungary as a compact. Then it was 65 million people represented by V3 and V4. And it helped in the process to get us more visible, more loud or vocal, and of course also united in effort to prepare domestically, to prepare regionally, and to be, a dynamic EU members. So these are different levels of preparation, of capacity building, of know-how sharing, and I think you should prepare for all of them. It is not only about specialists. Of course, we speak now about administrative capacities, but it is about more mentality and population and society which embrace the whole theme agenda as our own. And of course, studies, prepares, communicates, being interested in and building capacity as such, nation which is capable to deal with, to organize, to compete, to contribute.
We have more than 90% of Ukrainian population right now supporting the EU and NATO accession. I'm sure, though, that this is very much emotional support that have risen, especially, high after the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation has started. But for us, it's going to be an extremely important thing to keep on the population with us along this process and make sure that, as you are saying, how do you engage everyone and make sure that you have everyone participating and understanding what are you targeting at.
Yeah.
In that respect, you've mentioned that while focusing on your EU integration and negotiations with the European Commission and member states, you've also been focusing on implementation of the membership action plan for NATO membership. Well, as you might have heard, NATO has taken off the table the map for Ukraine, but there is an adapted annual national program in that respect, which is, I think, hopefully going to give us also a path to NATO. So my question right now is, how connected and how correlated were these processes of Euro-Atlantic integration and European integration, and whether you have had someone also specifically appointed to carry out the Euro-Atlantic integration work, or in your work as a chief negotiator, you knew that those political fundamentals have been also important for NATO membership. How did it present itself in your work as a chief negotiator?
Once again, I will raise this book because it is a chronicle where both processes are well described, better to say monitored and expressed or commented subjectively from the side of chief negotiator, who was in the middle, in the kitchen of the processes, and then objectively described by media clippings. I say it because there are not many, if any, chronicles of this sort with a lot of information for those who are coming later, for those who need to answer questions and prepare. And one of them is, once again, I will go back to your support, which is maybe, as you say, more emotional, to make it more rational and competent. It is important to work with people, to have them informed step by step, week by week, on all sensitivities in the process, on all issues which sooner or later will come to their door. And if they are informed and they change their emotion into rational, committed position, then you will win. If they are not informed, then they will be vulnerable from any point in the process which may be more difficult, more expensive, more sensitive. And therefore, for example, my role was not only outside with EU 15 and Commission and institutions, but also at home. A lot of communication, regular communication in the parliament, with political parties, with media, chambers, universities, associations, in order to keep them not only informed, but involved and on the same side, because we will need them later. And there is a negative experience from some countries, which is called post-accession shock or post-accession frustration. When people had, rosy expectations, everything nice, positive, and then difficulties come. European Union is not a perfect body. Nobody is perfect, but it can be better or worse. And it depends also on accession countries, whether they bring, real commitment, real mature society or emotions. And I mention it because both processes are somehow interlinked. They are independent, but, for example, political criteria which were set for invitation to NATO or accession to NATO have been the same on both sides: human rights, rule of law, constitutional observation or observance, economic criteria, kind of competitiveness, capacity to a strong competition. It is part of economic security, part of economic capacity. It is in both organizations. There are, of course, different different criteria for interoperability or crisis management, security and defense. But in many ways, and of course, membership of NATO and EU overlaps a lot. So the same countries request the same credibility in both processes. But formally, they are separated. In case of North Atlantic Treaty from 1949, there is no accession treaty, no new text, only accession protocols, which is more technical, financial, institutional issue. And in case of European Union, it is a treaty which builds a common legal space between the current union or future union and then acceding country. So it's a different process with different impact, but actually building on the same legacy. NATO started in 1949. The same Robert Schuman, on behalf of France, signed the Washington Treaty. The same Robert Schuman from France in 1949 initiated, together with many others, Winston Churchill and others, Council of Europe as a watchdog to human rights, to democracy, plurality, and also a priority jurisdiction through the court, European Court in Strasbourg on human rights. And the same Robert Schuman in 1950 then started his offer and policy toward Germany and 6 founding countries of European Community for Coal and Steel. So why I mention it? Because even historically, there are, correlations. It is in one stream towards Europe whole and free, but it was, never so far achieved, and we need to achieve it. I would mention even one attempt in 1954 under the title EDC, European Defense Community. French government started initiative to build European defense. But then the French Assemblée Nationale refused, as the last country, this plan for 6 countries. And now again, due to disastrous war and open aggression against Ukraine, Europe thinks about its capability in defense and security areas, because it's a part of the overall responsibility. We cannot be just dependent and asking others to protect us, to help us, but be capable. And last message, which is maybe a bit new in terms, but I say oftenly in European discussions that we cannot be only consumers of peace, but producers of peace, because this is something what mature communities should provide to Balkans, to Eastern Europe, and to the neighborhood.
Well, you've been mentioning this in different formats, that the enlargement is a win, or should be a win-win story, also with regard to what you just said with regard to security, that you cannot just consume based on whatever you achieved up to now, but it also about making sure that you're sharing this secure space as well. But with regard to win-win approach, because I totally share this approach, and I do believe that Ukraine as a candidate country and other aspiring nations should be coming in as a capable members and should be enhancing and strengthening the union. So it's not only exclusively about, again, protecting the internal markets vis-a-vis the newcomers and so on, but it's rather thinking how through common interest we are building something stronger together. In that respect, maybe one of the last questions, in that respect, what were the areas of economic interest for Slovakia that you had difficulty to defend during your negotiations, or you had to negotiate the transition periods for? What were the most sensitive and most difficult things?
Of course there are many, but as I mentioned, ambition. We wanted to become part of the European Union with transitional arrangement, with some transitional periods, not to build too much derogations or different EU. Actually, it is important principle because it makes then country really not only compatible, but mature in full sense. But there were sensitivities. One of them was, for example, early closure of the older nuclear power plant blocks, 2 blocks in Jaslovské Bohunice, which was a strong request of Austria, of France, of some other countries as well. So it was a precondition to get invitation, not to negotiate, but to get invitation to negotiate. We had to accept a compromise, not closure in 2000 as they requested, but 2006 and 2008, with a lot of compensation up to 700 million euros. And then when we agreed, we have started negotiations, and immediately foreign direct investment boosted into Slovakia, actually even in that particular region. So it was sensitive, even painful, I can say, politically, but then compensation came in full sense of the term. And sensitivities were free movements of capital, for example, purchasing of land in Slovakia. So we have succeeded to put a limit of 7 years and allow only renting of the soil, 7 plus 3, actually, 10 years altogether. The similar sensitivity was from the other side on free movement of labor, because Austria, Germany, and many countries requested to protect their labor market by ban on full employment or equal treatment of newcomers. So they established a transitional period of 2 plus 3 plus 2, maximum 7 years of ban on new labor coming to the older countries. It was more emotional or mental than economic measure, because actually Slovak labor force was welcome in many other countries, and then it is, of course, welcome even today in these neighboring states. There were sensitivities in agriculture, especially on the side of financial measures, direct payments, so-called direct payments, which were a strong policy in the Union and became even one of the original pillars of Europe. And actually, if you recall, EU budget has the biggest portion devoted to agriculture. So it is sensitive again on both sides. Joining the Union with weaker competitiveness, weaker financial strength or power of our governmental budgets meant necessity of a transitional arrangements. And we have succeeded to adopt it together with others because it was a horizontal measure for all. There were sensitivities, as I mentioned, in energy field, in transport, because cabotage, providence, the provision of transport services in foreign countries, in EU member states, was again limited through sensitivities of our position or differences on the market. So there was a significant transitional arrangement imposed by the Western countries. There were sensitivities in the financial sector because this is always something measurable. Also in the area of competition and state aid, because before accession, for example, Slovakia gave quite significant tax breaks to some companies like US Steel in Košice or Volkswagen in Bratislava, and this must be again harmonized, adapted to internal rules of the Union, and we did it with some, well-tuned compromise from both sides. All countries had to agree. Maybe the last I will mention was and remains environment, where Slovakia had a lot of environmental backlogs, deficits from the past, mentioned the communist regime. But we have succeeded to get a lot of financial support to overcome it, and also longest transitional periods as a result of professional negotiations. So all of that is actually, again, in the book. You will not find such compendium in other countries of then accession, which is very helpful to students, to new generation, to know what is and what was at stake with Slovakia's accession. We need to educate, we need to remember, we need to know, because then a lot of populism came and I was blamed that we didn't get as much as we wanted. We were not that successful. Actually, results of Slovakia's negotiations were either, comparable to others, to neighbors, frontliners, because they have been invited 2 years sooner, or even better in some areas than other countries. So I can proudly say it, and I can proudly, and transparently defend it, not for my sake, but for the sake of those who deal and live with common Europe today.
What was the balance of your work as a chief negotiator between your engagement with the European Commission and the member states? And who were your partners in terms of helping to maybe kind of caution some of the, threat perceptions in the member states at that particular point? Because I think that that's something that we will have to deal with to make sure that we are addressing the concerns of some particular nations. So what was this balance, European Commission and member states? How did you divide your work in that?
Thank you. Thank you for this distinction or question. I would comment both separately. Commission was very fair broker, like somebody in in between. It was not, defending EU 15 against Slovakia, but rather honest broker of the objective or process, and very helpful in adapting all details which we needed to learn, to embrace, to accomplish. For example, in the very first year, because Slovakia was seen as a latecomer, and if we did not make it, then we would have to dismantle customs union with Czechs, build Schengen around Slovakia instead of compact region, and there were many consequences, even political, if Slovakia didn't meet membership criteria together with neighbors. Visegrad 4, actually the best scenario. And we achieved it also because at the very first year, we got so-called high-level working group between European Commission and Slovakia. I was co-chairman of this special working group, and DG Director General of DG Enlargement, François Lamoureux, already late colleague, led the European side. And we met 5 times, and all recommendations, all important points have been transmitted to the government, and government adopted them. So it was very dynamic and trustworthy process of getting Slovakia into the negotiation process. This was before we got invitation, and it was very helpful. Maybe that's also a message or instrument for Ukraine. Secondly, in the process of IGC, because the formal process is intergovernmental conference, it is between states. So Commission is in the process, but doesn't have a real decision-making position, but was very helpful, as I said. And individual presidencies, starting with Austrian, then Finnish, and French, and Swedish, and Belgian, and Spanish, up to Greek, Portugal, have been very, very supportive. It was seen as historical process. Slovakia first was seen in the second group, and rate of probability joining together with neighbors was very low. And it has changed due to effort, very focused effort, and political commitment of individual presidencies. I mentioned them, maybe not all of them, but simply it was a must or an issue to fulfill. Maybe for some it was more about Poland, maybe some about Estonia, Hungary. But then more and more the complex attitude prevailed as the best option, and it happened this kind of breakthrough from small enlargement to
Big Bang.
Some people, yes, exactly, said Big Bang, prevailed under Swedish presidency. And I must recall policies or efforts of then Swedish foreign minister. She was assassinated and tragically.
Anna Lindh.
Yeah, Anna Lindh. Because then, after Swedish presidency 2001, we have been always seen as potential, of course, candidate for a big bang. And this was the best option for all. And it also meant not only most compatible process, not fragmented, but together, but also supported by European Parliament. We had a lot of voices in the Parliament right from the beginning, supporting Slovakia to join. This was also very important because even the Parliament votes on enlargement and accession treaty. So all in all, I must say that that time in Europe was very constructive and positive. This window is not that strong now, or atmosphere. You said before about populism also in the West. We need to get back to the principles, to the origins, and the meaning, I would say again, of this peace plan, because peace is a base of stability, security, and prosperity. And therefore, I say that Europe, European Union must become a producer or creator, promoter of peace, not only a consumer.
Well, Commissioner Figel, I'm so grateful for this conversation, and I would love to continue on and on, but the time is limited, so that we have our audience bearing with us. So my last question would be, what's your major lesson learned from Slovakian accession process that you would like to maybe pass over to Ukrainian negotiating team and to the Ukrainian political elites and to Ukrainian society?
Yeah. Maybe 2 points we didn't mention so far, but somehow they have been involved. One of our sensitive criteria to be, counted as a serious candidate and then, of course, accepted was treatment of minorities. And in our case, this was more about Hungarian minority in southern Slovakia. And we did a lot of good, concrete, correct efforts to show Hungarians in Slovakia that they are part of the process, that they are part of democracy, full part of society. Although, of course, state is built on nationhood, or it's as a national state. And it was very rewarding and beneficial because, for example, Hungarian minority parties have been always together with us, I say it as Christian Democrat, in effort to build a stable, reliable, democratic country. And when people feel that they are treated equally, fairly at home, that's, the base or recipe for success, because then we join the union together, not majority versus minority or without minority. And the second point is related to what you said about your life or Transcarpathia. We call still historically Podcarpathia, Zakarpathia, this region. I am there pretty often because I have many friends in Uzhgorod and the whole region, which still reminds by architecture, by culture, by mentality, Czechoslovak history. And my message is, people are decisive, and if they are fair, if they use this historical opportunity for living together, not only existing geographical existence on the map, but living together actively with the same values, with the same commitments, then borders doesn't mean that much. They have been moving in the history, especially in the 20th century, here and there. People remain, people live in their neighborhood. But the European idea, European dream, and European project actually is built on diminishing the meaning of borders. They remain administratively and formally, but people are allowed not only to travel, but really to live together. And that's the answer to so many differences, divisions, or pains of Ukrainian people today, that you will not find better answer. It's practical, it's working more than 70 years. It was the answer to the most belligerent nations in the West. And we should be able and capable to implement this invitation in our region, in our relations, where we live and will live. So I wish you on this road all the best. It's demanding, but really, really rewarding. And there is no better option than this legacy of Robert Schuman.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Figel. Thank you for the good wishes. I hope you stay also involved in helping us to go through this path successfully. And I hope that we will ensure that we are together protecting security and peace and making sure that it widens, we are willing as Ukrainians to focus on building, on living together, on creating, on contributing, as opposed to having to focus on survival and battle for our choice. But we hope that together we will be able to ensure that Ukraine is a sovereign, democratic, territorial, integral state that will be joining both the EU and NATO with backing of its neighbors and with backing of all the EU member states. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through your engagement and technological now offer, I would like to assure all citizens of Ukraine that we are, as Slovakia, not only a good and stable neighbor, but also a friend. And what we can do for your process, for your constructive, peaceful, and prosperous future, we will. I was lecturing at the Taras Shevchenko University as commissioner then for education. There is a lot to share today and for tomorrow. And be rest assured that in Slovakia, you will find a lot of advice, friends, joint interest, and I believe also common future.
Thank you. We are counting on you.
Thank you. All the best. Дякую.
Друзі, дякую, що додивилися. Ставте лайк, підписуйтеся і поширюйте це відео, щоб його змогли побачити якомога більше людей. Бережіть себе і до зустрічі на каналі EuroSapiens із Іванною Климпуш-Tsintsadze.